Hello and welcome to another video from Sustenance and Covering, the only channel that you need to not only survive the current apocalypse but actually enjoy it. And today's video is going to be a part 2 of the interview series that we've been doing. It's going to be a bit of a recap of some of the questions that people have asked on the last video, and people want to know about the two brothers, which we touched on briefly last week.
Yeah, it was kind
So,
of a good thing. We had somebody, like one of the earliest comments we got on the video was somebody saying, it would be good if we could all participate. Is there a way we can ask questions? And I thought, well, yeah, just ask questions. We'll answer them. And basically, look, if you leave a question in the comment and we don't address it, that's because we didn't get it. So I got to say that because sometimes people will indicate that they're not being responded to, and I don't know how that happens, but it does.
yeah.
So if you send a question and we don't immediately acknowledge it in the next video, then try again. Submit it to me, or if you can figure out, you can send it to Usamos here, and we'll answer questions because we're struggling to figure out what to say on these things. But then right immediately after somebody said, can we ask questions, somebody said, could you go deeper into the two brothers?
Yeah, so there you go, and that's a huge topic in and of itself, isn't it? Well,
Oh, yeah.
one of the things that did transpire in the last video is that we got into some things just about hell, specifically about hell, and I know that's prompted you to repost the hell video that disappeared for some reason. And I guess we're not going to spend too much time doing that.
Well,
But
here's the thing. It's like I make a video about hell. I make a video about the afterlife. I make a video, a bunch of videos about that subject. And so I don't leave any doubts as to my stand on those things. And it always kind of shocks me that somebody will come back and bring those subjects up on other videos that aren't about that subject. And so we're not going to, like, every week respond. If we were to do this every week, we would just have a non-stop series replying to questions about the Trinity, hellfire, things like that are just, they're non-issues to me. I don't think about them a lot, and I think most of my subscribers understand where I'm at on that. And so I'm not going to make this the hellfire video series.
we did say we touch on some things, and as it stands right now, you have 3 videos on your channel. There's hell, there's of angels and men, the afterlife, and there is a video about the rich man and Lazarus, specifically about the parable of the rich man and Lazarus.
Yeah, because that's a big one. Is a lot of times if you're talking to somebody that believes in hell and you ask them why they believe in hell, they can't really tell you with words. But if they can, it's always, well, Lazarus went to hell, or the rich man went to hell. Why would Jesus put rich man and Lazarus in there if there wasn't a hell? So I've got that whole series, and we're not going to read the script from that series. All you got to do is click. I'll leave a link. Just click on that link. You can see the video itself without me stumbling around trying to figure out what to say.
Yeah. Well, there's one thing we did say we'd recap on, and that was just have a bit of a talk about Gehenna and what Gehenna is and why Jesus was talking about Gehenna.
Yeah, that's only really brought up. No one ever brings up any scriptures about Gehenna except the one that's in the New Testament, because there's like a big gap between the Old Testament and the New Testament linguistically. Jesus calls it Gehenna, or the New Testament refers to it as Gehenna, but the Greek word Gehenna is a reference to the Valley of the Sons of Hinnom. And so you can go back to the Hebrew Scriptures and read everything about the Valley of the Sons of Hinnom and get a clearer understanding of what Gehenna is. But people don't make the connection, so they don't go back into the Old Testament and see what it is.
So what is it?
It was a place where, well, it was a kind of there was a lot of things that went on there, but the primary thing that went on there, supposedly, and this is not necessarily in the Bible says they sacrificed their sons to the fire. But the details that are given outside of the Bible, which may or may not be accurate, is that there was this huge statue, bronze statue. It was a furnace, shaped like a bull, had arms that were, let me see, yeah, you can see me in the
Like
camera, they had
this.
their arms out like that. And people would take their children, their firstborn, and put them in those arms, and there'd be a little baby, and just roll down into the furnace and burn alive. And so when the New Testament says, you know, if you do these things, you're going to be subject to Gehenna. So preachers in their infinite wisdom, wanting to perpetuate the myth of eternal hellfire, will translate that as hell. I think some of the Bibles translate that as hellfire or hell, and it makes it seem like it's somehow related to Hades, or which is the Greek word, or Sheol, which is the Hebrew word for the realm of the dead. And I've been in religions that would acknowledge that it referred to the grave, as if the hole in the ground where your body is put is Sheol. But it seems to me that there is some activity in Sheol. Sheol's a lot more important than just a place for storing dead bodies, because even people who have no dead body are in Sheol. You know, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, those people are not in a grave, but they are in Sheol. So it's more than just a grave. I don't think grave's a good translation of the word. But hell is not the same, or Sheol and Hades are not the same as Gehenna, even though it is a fact that Sheol and Hades are the same exact word, two different languages. And the reason for that is that when the New Testament was written, apparently God understood that it was a different language, so in order to make connections between the Old Testament and the New Testament, a lot of the New Testament writers quote it directly from the Old Testament. So Paul would refer back to Genesis and Exodus using exact wording as it appeared in the Septuagint Bible, so that we could know that these Greek words were the same exact thing as the earlier Hebrew words. Because you can get a guy that's really, really smart, and he can go into the Hebrew and he can argue that those words are not the same words. So when you're talking about the Old Testament hell, well, maybe those people didn't go to a burning fire eternity. But the people in the New Testament did. Well, they can't have, because there's no way in the world that, I think one of the scriptures, and let me try to quote it best I can, it says, you will not leave your loyal one in Sheol, and you will not leave him to the pit. So it's the way it's worded is very unique. It's not like three words. So it's a whole sentence or two sentences. And so when we get to the New Testament quotes that. But instead of using Sheol, it uses Hades. So there can be no, absolutely no difference between the two, because they quoted them as if it's the same word. So it is the same word.
Yeah, and there's in one of the Psalms as well. It says, "If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there," as well, speaking specifically to God.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of people that went to hell, or were expected to go to hell, which were not bad people. And when you throw that out there, a lot of people who just absolutely refuse to give up their religious doctrines will say, well, you know, of course, before Jesus, when everybody was in hell, like, God has no control over that. It's like, I'm sure it hurt his heart that he had to put his best friend Abraham in there, but, you know, just the way it was.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just throwing that out there because I have heard people use some insanely ridiculous arguments in their attempts to, you know, sustain the hellfire doctrine. It's like civilization.
Yeah.
Anytime you tell somebody, well, you know, we keep cutting down the trees, we're all eventually going to die. Oh, we're not cutting down trees. You know, every time we cut a 700-foot sequoia down, we always plant a seedling to replace it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank goodness. I was getting a little worried there.
In one of the conversations that we've had in the past, we talked specifically about Gehenna being like a place of ritual human sacrifice, and you could relate that to things like the nation's practice, like warfare. So yeah, you give up your sons and daughters.
People think, okay, when you, this is another thing, this is one of the reasons that colleges exist, is to teach people the reason we have war. You know, they have this political science and whatever. It's like, well, the proletariat tried to stand up to save the economic balance scale for, and it's like, no, the reason they had that war was to entertain the insanely wealthy.
Mm.
And I was like, well, no. If you look back at Vietnam, we couldn't let the communists get a foot. No, that was for the entertainment of the insanely wealthy. It has nothing to do with. You could, if somebody somewhere decides to have a war, they've got a 7-volume set of books explaining why.
Mm.
But if you go back and look at all of those reasons, they're not even within the realm of reasonableness. They're just foolish conjecture.
Mm-hmm.
When people go to war, it's because powers that be are instructed by the demons that possess them to send people to war. It's a sacrifice that has to be made. It's basically, if you want airplanes, got to expect a couple of hundred people to die every now and then.
Yeah.
In horrible, fiery deaths.
Mm-hmm.
Into somebody's house so that they can die too.
Mm-hmm.
You want automobiles? Now we got, several million human beings have been killed in accidents, and they're still okay.
Yeah.
But if I rob a liquor store, they'll send me to jail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think that covers it?
Yeah, that's Gehenna. Gehenna is, if you want civilization, you have to be prepared for human sacrifice. There's no way to make agriculture without people dying, or animals dying. There's no way to have structures without people dying.
Or an economy.
Yeah, you can't have an economy without people dying. Economy, in the Bible, the economy is always associated with Mars, the god of war. And everybody knows that Mars is the god of war, but Mars is also the god of theft, and it's not just war, but it's war and theft and the economy.
And there's a link between those three things.
Yeah, I mean, when Jesus got here, there was already a 4,000-year history of Marduk, the god of war and theft and economy.
Yeah. Okay. Gehenna. You ready to talk about the two brothers? Are you ready to talk about dualism and the two brothers and how that works out in the Bible?
Yeah, I think that most religions recognize that religions outside of Christianity are based on dualism. But it's obvious. I mean, we've already talked about that a little bit. But honestly, if you read the Bible also has a whole lot of stories in it that seem to be based on the same concept. That's this constant conflict between good and evil, the yin and the yang. But in the Bible, we have so many stories about two brothers struggling to take control that it's very obvious to someone reading the Bible with an open mind that the Bible itself is about dualism. Now, I'm not saying that the Bible is the same religion as all those outside religions, because every religion is basically based on